Okay, in this video I'm going to illustrate how you can obtain information when you run a LISREL model using SIMPLIS command language, how you can obtain information concerning indirect and total effects of one variable on another variable. So, and basically we're going to be focusing on an illustration using path analysis. So, this is a data set that I've been working with through several videos, and so basically I had converted an SPSS file to a LISREL system file. This particular data file right here had no missing data, but this would work if you happen to have data that are missing as well. But at any rate, this is just basically what I've done is I've gone through and specified my path analysis model, and you know, I can kind of draw it out here based on the syntax. So specifying the relationships, you know, I've got my dependent variable or my end variable, if you will, is achievement, and so that's the variable that ultimately we're trying to kind of predict in this model. So we've got achievement being predicted by cognitive engagement and work avoidance. So essentially, kind of drawing this out, not very well I might add, but still drawing it out. I've got cognitive engagement as a predictor, as well as work avoidance. So I'll put WA right here for work avoidance. And then I have predictors of these variables. So essentially what I'm specifying is a mediation model. So I have subject matter interest, intrinsic motivation, and anxiety being predictive of cognitive engagement. So I'm going to draw a little arrow right here, and I'll just call this subject matter interest. Then I have, so this is one of the exogenous predictors in the model. I have intrinsic motivation, which is another exogenous predictor. And then I have anxiety as yet another predictor. So I have all three of these variables being included as predictors of cognitive engagement. And then I also have subject matter interest and anxiety as predictors of work avoidance. So it basically the model is specified in this kind of way. So this is basically what you, in path analysis, what we're doing is we're testing for mediation effects. So the way this is laid out is that, yes, we are looking at direct effects, and basically each arrow represents a direct effect. So we have subject matter interest directly predicting cognitive engagement directly predicting achievement, intrinsic motivation directly predicting cognitive engagement, and then we have anxiety directly predicting cognitive engagement and work avoidance. But we also have the effects of these exogenous predictor variables on the variables downstream. So we have achievement down here. So when we take the effect of a variable on another variable via intervening variables, then we're basically interested in the idea or the notion of indirect effects. So each arrow would reflect a direct effect, but when we take the product of paths, say for instance if this is A and this is B right here, if we take that product, that we can compute an indirect effect of subject matter interest on achievement. So and so we might be interested in testing whether or not the indirect effect of one variable on another is statistically significant. We also have an indirect effect of subject matter interest on achievement via work avoidance. So we could take you know, this path C right here and this path D right here, take the product of those two paths, and we would also have an indirect effect. So if we actually add it up, so in a nutshell, if we take A times B, that would be one indirect effect. That's one route by which subject matter interest could have an impact on achievement. And if we take C times D, that would be yet another indirect effect that could be observed. And if we take really both of those effects and we add them together, then we would sort of end up with kind of a total indirect effect, if you will. So I'll just put a little plus out here. So we could look at the cumulative indirect effect of subject matter interest on achievement. In LISREL, if we ask for the indirect effects, what it's going to do of one variable on another, it's going to basically take sort of the cumulative indirect effect of that one variable on the other variable. But in theory, we could also break this down into each individual path representing or particular routes reflecting different indirect effects. Also, I mean, we could also specify, in theory, we could specify yet a direct effect here as well. So if I specify a single arrow from one variable to another, that is a direct effect. So I could have, path E right here, and that would be a direct effect. So, SMI having its impact on achievement via these two intervening variables right here, which we will call mediating variables, because the idea is that they're mediating the effect of this variable onto this outcome variable. So we can have that effect, which is reflecting the indirect effect of subject matter interest on achievement, and we also have the direct effect in this particular case with E. So if we take the indirect effect of one variable onto the other and then add any direct effects, we end up with a total effect of one variable onto the other. So you can see in this particular illustration right here that intrinsic motivation would only have an indirect effect on achievement via the mediating variable cognitive engagement, and anxiety would have only an indirect effect via the two mediators of cognitive engagement and work avoidance. Neither of them have a direct effect, so the total effect then would equal the indirect effect. But in the case of subject matter interest, if I include this path right here, then the total effect will include both the indirect effect of subject matter interest on achievement via cognitive engagement and work avoidance, plus the direct effect, which is E, as you can see right here. So at any rate, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this off, and I'll go ahead and just add for achieve. I'm going to go ahead and just add a direct effect and see what happens here. So I'm going to add subject matter interest so that I can model that direct effect as well. So if I want to get that kind of information and test those indirect effects, then I will add a line. Basically, I will type in LISREL output, and if I use EF, then that's going to give me the unstandardized total and indirect effects in the model. You'll also notice that the LISREL output is not going to look very much, or it's going to look a lot different from the output that you typically get when you are running the analysis using the SIMPLIS command language. In fact, let me just run it without this. So this is path diagram here, and so I'll just run this without it. Residuals, I normally ask for that as well. And so we'll run it without, and we'll just take a quick look at the output. So you can see, actually in this case, adding, as compared to our previous models, adding that direct effect actually improved the overall fit of the model. The RMSEA value actually drops to 0, even with 4 degrees of freedom. So that's really nice. Nevertheless, the direct effect, the path, was not statistically significant. So sometimes that happens. Nevertheless, just kind of looking at the output, you can see that we have our using the SIMPLIS, the output from based on the SIMPLIS command language, you get your structural equations. You can see you get your goodness of fit statistics and everything, and it looks all nice and everything. Now, if we want to get the indirect effects, we can't get it through SIMPLIS in this kind of way. So what we have to do is basically ask for LISREL output. So what we can do is just type in LISREL output and EF. And so now when I highlight this and run it, it's going to give me the output in the form of LISREL. So the path diagram is exactly the same as what we had previously. But now in this case, when we scroll down, you'll notice that we get a variety of matrices. So this is in LISREL command language. This is basically giving you the specifications of the parameters in the model. When you scroll down, you get different matrices. You get a beta matrix, a gamma matrix. The beta matrix is reflecting the relationships among the endogenous variables in the model. The gamma matrix is reflecting relationships between the exogenous predictors and the endogenous variables in the model. We also have a phi matrix and psi matrices as well. You can see that with the phi matrix, this is reflecting the covariation among those exogenous variables. And the psi matrix is just capturing the unexplained variation in the endogenous variables within the model. So kind of scrolling down, you also see you've got the squared multiple correlations and so forth. So the information that you saw when we ran the model just using the and not requesting the LISREL output is exactly the same. It's just that it's structured a little bit differently, and it's in the form of different matrices. So you have the goodness of fit statistics that appear. So these are all the same as what would have been printed out previously. And as we scroll down, you can now see that we have total and indirect effects. So these are the effects of each of our predictor variables on the basically our outcome variables. So you've got SMI, the total effect of subject matter interest on cognitive engagement. Really, that is just a direct effect because we specified that subject matter interest would directly predict cognitive engagement. So this would be nothing more than just the unstandardized regression coefficient for that direct effect, and there's the significance test. Then you have intrinsic motivation to that and anxiety. So these are really, in this particular model, these total effects are nothing more than just the direct effects. When you look at subject matter interest on work avoidance, again, this would be nothing more than direct effects because we didn't specify any intervening variables. The same goes with anxiety, and you can see that there's no effect of intrinsic motivation on work avoidance because we fixed that parameter to 0. And basically we fix it to 0 by not specifying that within the model. Then we have subject matter interest to achievement, and so this is the unstandardized total effect, and this is capturing both the direct and indirect effect of subject matter interest on achievement. The indirect effect flowing through cognitive engagement and work avoidance, and the direct effect obviously being just the the direct effect that was specified in the model. Intrinsic motivation, its indirect effect on achievement is 0.022. Anxiety on achievement via the mediators, and there was no direct effect. So basically, the total effect is actually just going to equal the indirect effect. But you can see that each of these in this matrix right here, these are unstandardized estimates, and you have the t-values below. So these, you can use these to assess the significance of these effects. So basically, if your effect is greater than positive 1.96 or negative or less than negative 1.96, that's the convention t values associated with the conventional alpha thresholds. In a large sample, then you would say that the effects are statistically significant. So subject matter interest and anxiety appear to have statistically significant total effects on achievement. Now, when we scroll down, you can also see that it's broken down into indirect effects of X on Y. So now you've got subject matter interest, and it's just the indirect effect on achievement. And so you can see that in this particular case, again, these are all unstandardized estimates. These are the standard errors, and these are the t-values. So you can see that subject matter interest had a significant indirect effect on achievement. Intrinsic motivation did not, and anxiety had a significant negative indirect effect. So basically, higher levels of anxiety were associated with lower levels of achievement. So then also you can see that you have total effects related to the relationships among the endogenous variables themselves. So the long and short of it is that we can basically, we've broken down these effects. So you can see again that the total effect of SMI or subject matter interest on achievement was statistically significant. You can see that the indirect effect of subject matter interest on achievement was significant. But when you go back and you look at the direct effect, and we'll just kind of look back up here. Let's see if I can find the matrix here. When we look up here in our gamma matrix, where we're looking at the relationship between the exogenous predictors and the endogenous variables, you can see that that was not significant. And that basically coincides with what we saw when we ran our model. And when we actually look at the path diagram, you can see that this path right here was not statistically significant. So we could basically say that, or we would infer that the effect of SMI on achievement really seems to flow through these intervening variables, and it's not really having much of a direct effect on achievement. Now, if I want to break things down a little bit further, let's just kind of go back to our output, our SIMPLIS language here. If I want to also include in my output standardized indirect effects and standardized total effects, which would be interpreted more along the lines of beta coefficients, then I could just type in all right here. So I would have LISREL output all. So then when I run the analysis, again, this is all the same specification as what we had before. But now when we look at the output, now you're going to get a lot more information too. And it becomes a little bit more unwieldy because there are just so many different matrices that you see in the output file. But if you scroll on down, so there's our beta matrix and our gamma matrix. There's our phi matrix and psi matrix. You can see that those are all the same information we had before. There are goodness of fit statistics. If we keep scrolling down, like I said, it's a lot of information. But now you can see, as we get towards the bottom, you can see that you have in the path analysis, in addition to the unstandardized coefficients in our earlier matrices, or beta gamma matrices, you also have the standardized regression weights in these matrices down below. And then as we scroll a little bit further, now you have, once again, you have the total and indirect effects. So these are the same matrices that we were interpreting before in terms of the total effect and indirect effects. These are unstandardized, and these are basically, again, these are the test statistics that are given below, which you can use in order to determine whether or not an effect is statistically significant. When we scroll down further, you also get the standardized total and indirect effects. So as you can see right here, these would be interpreted more along the lines of beta weights, when you're talking about the magnitude of the effect. So at any rate, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that, but as I said, you can basically from this information, you can actually obtain statistical tests of total effects and indirect effects. You can also essentially report on the standardized effects and discuss those in effect size terms.